Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, from the edge to the data center to cloud and from LAN to WAN to wireless. We'll be surveying the modern networking landscape on today's EcoCast with help from our experts at Rubrik, Gigamon, and Duo. Thank you so much for joining us here today on the EcoCast. We've got a great event lined up for you. Before we get started, you should know a few things about the EcoCast. We at Actual Tech Media created the EcoCast and MegaCast event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology to help you get all your questions answered quickly and efficiently, never having to leave your home or office. And hey, why not win some valuable prizes while we're at it and, hopefully have some fun. We're all former IT professionals ourselves here at Actual Tech Media, and we know how tough it can be out there in the world of IT. And, hopefully you'll find some answers to your questions and some innovative solutions to help solve your challenges here today on the EcoCast. My name is Steve Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. Like I said, encourage your questions there in the questions pane of your audience console. I see many of you have already said hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are across the United States and around the world, and we appreciate that. But we also want your technical questions for today's Q&A sessions that will be coming up during the event. We even have a best question prize to help encourage those questions, so keep them coming. I'll talk more about that here in just a moment. I'll also have some poll questions for you out there in the audience as well, because we want to get your feedback. We encourage you to socialize this event. You can do that there in your audience console. On the bottom of the screen, there is a Twitter icon. If you click on that and you tweet right there using that box where it says ATM EcoCast, you can type a tweet and click submit. You'll have to do the standard Twitter authorization the first time that happens with any Twitter web-based app. But the cool thing here is that your tweet will automatically have the ATM EcoCast hashtag appended to it, and we encourage you to do that. We'll be following you, retweeting, commenting on any of those tweets, so socialize away. And then, of course, you can find a number of great resources there in the Handouts tab of your audience console. I see a link to rubrik.com for additional information, as well as two different PDF resources, one from Gigamon on closing the cloud visibility gap, and one from Duo Security, which is a really cool resource on design thinking for DevOps. So you can go ahead and just download those PDF resources right now and check them out after the event. Click on the Rubrik link. That'll open up a new web browser window or tab, and you can learn more about Rubrik during the Rubrik presentation. So don't forget about the resources in the Handouts tab. And then finally, you may have seen the little prize icon there on the slides window. Of course, this is the EcoCast. We always have some great prizes today. It is 3 Amazon $500 gift cards, one after each of the 3 presentations on the EcoCast today. And if that wasn't enough, we also have 3 more Amazon $50 gift cards for our best question prizes. Of course, you must be live on the event and asking a question to be entered into the best question prize drawing. So, don't forget about asking a question. If something's on your mind, that best question prize is there to help, maybe shake it loose a little bit, give you some incentive to ask it away. Winners, of course, must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions that you can find there in the Handouts tab of your audience console. You must be present on the live event. All prize winners must be able to submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and we reach out to prize winners via email after the event. You always have the option to make a donation to selected charities. Over the years, we've donated thousands of dollars to charity on the MegaCast and EcoCast event. It makes us feel good. It makes you feel good. It helps someone less fortunate. So if you win a prize and you'd like to donate to charity, we would love to help you do that. We've done that in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can actually go to the Handouts tab, and there's a link right there to the Gorilla Guide Book Club. If you aren't familiar with the Gorilla Guide Book Club, It's a great way to stay up to date on enterprise technology, new innovations in IT. These are free, easy to read enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts. They work on your Kindle, your iPad, your mobile device, and there's, I don't know, maybe 100 of them now. Download them all. They're fun and easy to read, and it's a great way, again, to stay up to date. So make sure that you check those out, gorilla.guide or in the handouts tab. Like we said, the hashtag for today on Twitter is ATM EcoCast. You can follow Actual Tech Media. And hey, why not follow me as well, David M. Davis. Subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels, YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast. You might not have known, but we post all of our recordings of our online events on our YouTube channel. So make sure you follow us there as well to get notifications of our latest and greatest events after the event, of course, if you want to peruse the recordings. You can subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store as well. And on the top right-hand side of your audience console, you'll find a link there also to our LinkedIn page. That's where we post all of our latest and greatest content. One final way to win a prize is to refer an IT friend or coworker to Actual Tech Media's online events, and you both could win an Amazon $300 gift card. We hold those drawings monthly. And you can find a link to that there in the handouts tab, or just click on that link on the bottom of the slides window. At the end of the event, you'll also be automatically redirected to our Refer a Friend page, and we appreciate your participation in that. We promise not to spam your IT friends and coworkers. We will send them an invitation to an upcoming list of events. If they don't respond, we'll send them one more reminder, and then we won't bother them after that. All right, now, before I introduce you to today's first presenter, I want to do just a little bit of stage setting here and talk about, today's topic, surveying the modern networking landscape. And of course, the network over the years has become more and more critical to our companies because we're sending more and more data over those networks every single day, right? I mean, we have the statistics here on the screen. These are just mind-blowing. Keep in mind, these are all in a single day. 4 petabytes of data is being created over on Facebook, 500 million tweets, 3.9 billion people using email, and they're sending 294 billion emails. 463 exabytes of data will be created every day by 2025. So just mind-blowing statistics. Of course, these are worldwide, but if you just think about your own network, how much data is being sent across that network every day? And, that network is no longer just in your data center. Of course, according to Gartner, by this year, more than 50% of enterprise-generated data will be created and processed outside the data center or the cloud. So that means what we're calling now edge, locations. And edge locations are, not just retail locations, restaurants. I mean, they've got Kubernetes clusters at fast food restaurants now. They're data centers on telephone poles or on cruise ships or oil platforms. And, we've got electric vehicles that are generating, 4 terabytes of data every single day. So some incredible statistics of data out there that's not just, again, in your enterprise data center. You can't just walk in there and look at it and touch the servers and the storage arrays anymore. That data is distributed across mobile devices, laptops, and of course in the cloud. And this creates a huge challenge for us in IT because, at the same time, we've got these attackers trying to attack that data no matter where it is. And for some reason, they always wear hoodies. I'm not sure why that is. But in all seriousness, we don't know where they are. We don't know who they are. We don't know if they wear hoodies or not. But they're out there trying to attack our data. They're sending us, email phishing attempts. They're trying to get into our networks, trying to get through the firewall, trying to attack our laptops and mobile devices, out on our employees' home networks to get access to our company's data. So we have to be even more vigilant, than ever before to protect that data on the network, no matter where, the definition of the network takes us. We need to really, get some rocket fuel to improve our security, improve our data protection, improve our multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, whatever we can do to just give some incredible performance and scalability and security to our network, because they're coming in, left and right, and we need to do whatever we can do to protect that network, no matter where it is. We need greater visibility into the network and the usage of the network, and we're going to learn about that here today on the EcoCast. And as well as the network visibility, we also need greater security visibility. So I encourage you to, kind of sit back and relax on this event, learn about the 3 different innovative solutions on today's EcoCast, and, kind of try to think about your company's network to get some X-ray vision and look into it, do some analysis on what you could do to improve your data protection, your visibility, your security protections. I think it's a great opportunity for that. Of course, the goal here is to make your life in IT easier, whether you're a network administrator, IT director, maybe a one-man generalist at a small company, or a CIO at a very large company. The idea here is to survey the modern networking landscape and learn about some really innovative tools to make your life easier. And with that, I've got a poll question for you. The question on the screen here is, what's your time frame for really taking some action, adding some new solutions around data protection, visibility, or security, or updating the solutions you have at your company? So if you haven't answered one of these poll questions before, you do it right there in the slides window. Select the option that corresponds to you and your company, 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12, 12 to 24, or maybe you're just not quite sure. And then as soon as we get a good majority of folks to respond to this poll, we'll move on, and I'll introduce you to our first presenter. All right. Thank you for all the responses there on the poll. We do appreciate your feedback. Let's get just a few more. I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to respond. All right. Thank you so much for those responses. We'll have additional polls during the EcoCast today, and of course, I appreciate your feedback in advance on those polls. All right, so with that, I'm excited to kick it off here and introduce you to our first expert presenter. Welcome Matt Dove, who's a sales engineer at Rubrik. Matt, it's great to have you on. Take it away.
All right, so kind of looking at what we're trying to do here today, I think what we wanted to focus on is enhancing the security posture across your private, public, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environment. And one of the things that Rubrik does from a cloud data management perspective, I think, is really extend well into that process. What we see right now, oftentimes in our ecosystem of partners and prospects and customers, are really 3 things that come top of mind when you start talking about the sprawling data center, right, within multiple clouds. Cyber resiliency, right? So ransomware remediation. I don't think you can turn on your computer in the morning without seeing 3 updates about something like that. So how to build a platform that focuses on cloud security and data security and be resilient to one of these events. The underpinning of that being a backup and recovery strategy, I think that is cost efficient, right? So it's insurance, but on some level, you're not going to pay 10 times the insurance that you did yesterday, right? Even for a better solution. So making that a cost-efficient strategy. And then within these multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environments, de-risking that journey, like wherever you are within your status, whether you're just trying to get into figuring out what to do in the cloud or whether you're trying to get momentum to get there. So kind of de-risking that from a perspective. So what Rubrik kind of does within this, it's really a zero trust data management platform that starts in the bottom tier, right? Your kind of traditional on-prem data center, all the different data sources that we can talk about. We've extended that into the public clouds, all the major public cloud providers. And then we've put a policy framework in place that it has an immutable file system, allows you to kind of really have that air-gapped, logically air-gapped data set of your production environment. Policy-based protection strategies, so you're not scheduling jobs, you're trying to eliminate the manual intervention that you have to go through to maintain data protection. Do things like detect anomaly, right? Not just detect high change rates and things like that, but actually look at the data set and tell you what's happening at your data set level, and then really kind of extend application recovery, be able to recover that quickly. So from that perspective, you know, if you look at kind of like the traditional environment, the legacy backup where you have agents and proxies and servers and data movers pushing data onto storage, there's a lot of complex parts there that take a lot of man hours to go ahead and then manage it and maintain it and always know about it. We kind of wrap that up into a single view for cloud data management where we can push data across all the different tiers and give you one kind of cohesive data protection strategy that blends across all of the management layers of this multi-cloud environment. And then we do that from a zero trust perspective, right, where we orchestrate that, but we do it from a manner where we can really kind of lock down the access to the data. So modern data protection strategy, you know, you have a bunch of different pieces here. We kind of collapse that into one hyper-converged appliance. We've eliminated a lot of the legacy architecture pieces and accelerating the recovery, the ability for us to then automate and kind of procedurally at scale recover the data set that you care about. Again, with our kind of approach with SLA policy-based information, and then eliminating the renewals, right? Eliminating all these different siloed, different tiers and different tool sets that you'll have for each different unique data set that might be in a different cloud. So again, the idea of a cost-efficient approach to that with Rubrik. So big threat right now, cybersecurity event. You know, you get a ransomware attack. It locks down your data set. So you have to figure out, well, what am I going to do? What's my approach? So I pay the ransom, which nobody really wants to do, so I attempt to recover it. It's probably your first option. So you engage like your SecOps and IT ops teams to go ahead and try to identify what happened. Can I do a restore? Were the backups compromised? You pay the ransom. If they weren't compromised and you can actually do the restore, well, then you have that secondary day two operation piece. You know, what do I recover? How far back in time do I go to recover it? So there's a lot of complexity with trying to identify what to do inside of a cyber event, and all of this is on the fly. These procedures are generally not predefined, not very well at least. So our kind of extension is to take the principles of data protection that matter, you know, air-gapped data, immutable file system, zero trust architecture, and we kind of focus on the sweet spot, right? Logical backups on offline, logically air-gapped data set. They cannot be edited. You know, we wrote our own file system that's immutable in format, and zero trust, right? We don't assume anything has the right to actually access or control data sets unless it's a certificate-based mutual authentication call. So our approach then allows you to kind of really focus security at the data point. We are not endpoint protection. We are not a security tool set. We're really the backup safeguard. So what we're going to do is, hey, the ransomware happened. Can you recover? Well, you engage your SecOps team, and what we're going to really do is our backups are safeguarded because they're immutable in first touch. We then scope the attack for you. We have a SaaS offering that tells you specifically down to the file if the entropies or other items have happened. And then what we do is focus on how do we go ahead and deliver that out and recover that fast in an automated and orchestrated fashion. So it's a really different approach altogether to data protection with data security as its underpinning. Everything done from the perspective of a SaaS offering, so we don't want to impact your production workloads to do this. It's all done from the backup estate, right? So that's a pretty significant little piece for us.
What it looks like to have a multi-cloud strategy and the security around it, a little bit what we're seeing out in the marketplace. And now what I want to do is actually show you what it looks like to have a single strategy that focuses on data security, that focuses on providing a secure platform to ingest your data, that focuses on the ability of a better backup solution, take workload off your team's plate, have one team be able to control a consistent data protection strategy across the multitudes of clouds and workload locations that you have, and also do it in a cyber resilient manner, a way that in case the four walls of your data center break down, in case you have an event, which is more and more likely every day, that you have the ability to guarantee your recoverability of all your sensitive data, all the data that matters to your environment. What that looks like from our perspective is we have this global view. It starts with the ability for us to kind of give you information around on-premise workloads, cloud-based workloads, SaaS offerings, M365, things of that nature. And what I want to do is just showcase how we start moving data, right? The first thing that we're going to do is look at GPS, which is kind of our ability to look at all workloads in all environments. So I'm going to focus first on clusters. Clusters are on-premise workloads for us, right? So we have 10 data centers to look at here that are all over Johannesburg and Mumbai and Los Angeles. So all your physical on-premise environments, where your data resides in your physical presence that matters to you, I'm going to focus on one, AMER rubric 1. On that environment, it starts with better backup. We're going to talk about security and security posture across multi-cloud, but it all starts with having a secure framework for a better backup platform. The secure plan for having our own immutable file system that as we ingest the data set is now immune from a cyber event from happening. How do we help you adopt a cloud journey if you haven't already started one? The first piece is getting your data to a cloud, right? It takes about 5 minutes to set up an archival location for us. We support all of the major cloud providers. Some smaller cloud environments just needs to be S3 compatible. So you choose the cloud that you want to move into. You want to start dipping your toe in the water if you don't already have a defined strategy. We get your data out there. We get your data out there from an automated protection policy perspective. We're going to let you do something like take a policy instead of you having to create all the different workloads and jobs and scheduling things to move from one location to another. What we're going to simply do is create a policy-based protection strategy. Continuous data protection. Do you want it? Do you want a sub 1 minute RPO recovery point for very critical workloads? You enable it. It's a checkbox. You don't need it for that. It's a less critical workload. You disable it. You start with the base frequency and the base retention of everything that you want to recover, right? It's about base frequency. How often am I taking the snapshot? Retention. How long do I want to keep each one of those base frequencies? And the next is now the lifecycle management of where it resides inside that, in this case, 3-year piece. I don't want to keep data forever, right? I want to be able to do a mass recovery at scale for fast impacted data. You recover data sets from short periods of time to go 30 days. I'll keep it on-prem. I'm going to send it to a second site for a DR event, keep it there for 14 days. I don't need to recover in a DR event generally from more than a couple days, but I'll keep it there for 14 days. But I also need to make sure I can recover data for the entire duration of time that I'm talking about. Well, let's use cloud storage. I'm going to instantly send this out to the default tier, in this case of Azure, right? I can send it directly out to the archive tier if you'd want. We also support, again, if we go to like an AWS policy, you can send it to the default storage class. You can send it out to Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive. You can really start driving down operational costs. You want a cost-efficient data management platform. In addition, now we've simplified getting that policy-based assignment, creating a protection strategy that gets your data off to the cloud. To deploy it, you can do it at any level. Virtualized environments, you get a very quick look at what the workload is, what the protection strategy is, whether it was derived from a higher level tag, making sure that the child objects always have the same protection policies, or whether it's directly assigned. The idea is you never have a miss. We support all the main hypervisors. We support physical workloads in your data center, NAS shares, SQL, Oracle, whatever database platforms you have. The idea that you never have a miss, it's an automated deployment strategy that automatically finds new data and assigns a policy to it because it's a set and forget kind of a model. The key part, as soon as we touch the data, it's immutable. You can't be impacted by that cyber event. Well, that's great. Everything is also automated. Everything is an API call down to this UI. There's no software. You're not managing an application, pointing data to a database. You're managing an API call to an appliance. These API calls are well established. We have entire code banks that you can lift and adapt into your environment to simplify all of the day two operations. So it's better backup. That's secure, underpinning of security. So now I have a better backup platform strategy. I have a way to manage better backup for all of my on-premise environments. It doesn't help me in multi-cloud or hybrid cloud. That's on-premise. So hybrid cloud looks like inventory, right? I have SaaS offerings. I have AWS and Azure and Google Cloud, all these different cloud environments that I have workloads in. It's the same strategy. I take an SLA-based policy assignment. I choose an application or a web service that I want to go ahead and back up. And I have the same exact strategy about how often and how long. Right, so I take a backup every day for a month. I have extended retention on some of it. Where do I want it to sit within that entire time? Do I want to replicate it to a secondary AWS region or Azure region? You can choose that. How long do you want it to sit in that second region? And then do I want to do log backups? Something very simple. Now the idea is I have a exactly similar process to what I've done on-premise for SQL and VMware and Hyper-V, AHV, Oracle. I've extended that out to the cloud. I've given you the exact same protection strategy, protection tool set, whether it's an on-premise or a cloud-native workload. So that's great. How do I apply it? Same exact concept. At any one of these cloud inventories, I can go to, and I can we're going to use the native terminology from the platform and allow you to make an assignment at any level of it. AWS, I can go to Azure. Looks a little bit different, but it's the same general construct: subscriptions, resource groups, tag rules, the things that those cloud native providers allow us to assign protection policies to. So now I have SLA policies, a secure platform to ingest the data that's immune from ransomware, that has a consistent data protection policy across all of your multi-cloud environments. The last thing I want to do then is talk about, well, cyber resiliency. We'd address cyber resiliency a lot within the environment. I want to be able to recover from a ransomware event. Like if something happens, I need to be able to identify it and recover quickly. Well, phase one is your backup's immutable. You're guaranteed to be able to recover. Phase two is we need to help you do it quickly. We're not looking for things like high levels of change in last night's backup, right? A big incremental backup is just a big incremental backup. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a ransomware event. We want to do things like what happened. Here it's high confidence and high levels of encryption. We're going to let you look down into the actual snapshot and browse down what was impacted. When we detect the anomalous behavior, we're going to look at it. We're going to see what's inside of that anomalous behavior set and tell you all the way down to an individual file, what was impacted, what happened, let you filter out to the noise so you can focus on just the impacted data. We're not scanning for malware. We're not looking for virus signatures or ransomware signatures. Some of those are day zero, they don't help. What we're doing is detecting anomalous behavior because we're looking at your data from today and comparing it to yesterday, this Monday to last Monday, and we're identifying behaviors that are abnormal and alerting you to it and telling you why we think it's abnormal. This is not something that typically happens. Then you go ahead and choose whatever it is that you need to recover, whether it's 1 or 10 different workloads that were impacted, and you hit recover. This is now where you start really driving down a recovery time on a cyber event. If you have 100 terabytes of front-end data that we're protecting, you don't have 100 terabytes of data typically impacted by a cyber event. You might have 10, 20, 30. But it's identifying the blast radius that matters. We've just shown you very easily, you can go down to an individual file. You can now automate the recovery at scale in whatever method you see fit. And when you hit recover, it just makes a call back down to the appliance to start actually recovering all those jobs and all those functions to the point in time you've chosen. You're not rolling back 30 days. You're recovering the specified file sets that were impacted, the specified VMs or shares, and you're recovering them back to a specified time that we know is when the data changed. Now, next piece, that's great. We identified what data was impacted, we recovered it, it looks awesome, but now you have the postmortem, right? You're up and running, the business is functioning, and now you have to answer the question, what was impacted? So the next piece is then, what was inside the data set that was impacted by the ransomware event? And that's where we then start giving you the intelligence around what types of data, sensitive data that you have. It can be canned things like, driver's license and bank routing. They can be custom items like customer IDs within your organization, employee IDs. You create analyzers, you put them in policies, and you scan your data. And what we then do give you back is a very granular look at how many files have sensitive data in it, how many sensitive data hits are in those files. Do you have any files that have open access, meaning I have sensitive data in it and I don't have proper security controls around the share? So what kinds of things, what kind of intelligence can I do? And all of this is a SaaS offering. It's a checkbox. There's zero deployment of agents and proxies. It's a zero lift deployment from an infrastructure perspective, and there's zero impact on production environment. You're not doing things that are impacting your hypervisors and your physical workloads out there, and you're not spinning up more infrastructure to look at this. It's all done off the backup state. So at a high level, that's what we wanted to focus on. How do we deliver a consistent strategy for on-prem, public cloud, hybrid cloud? It has to have an underpinning of security. It has to have a zero trust architecture. It has to be able to deliver a cyber resilient offering, and you have to do it in a way that's cost effective. So that's what we wanted to focus on today. Thank you for your time.
Great presentation, Matt. Really cool to see that demo. Thank you so much for sharing that. We do have some questions for you from the audience if you're ready.
I am ready.
Here's a question from Scott, Matt, who wants to know, how can I ensure that once my backup data is written, that it can never be changed?
We do that specifically. We wrote our own file system. It's a Debian-based operating system. We've actually eliminated the edit and modify commands. So the only thing that you can do is append. So as we commit our data to disk, we actually abstract it through an append-only file format. So any data that's been committed to disk is a full strike write in a new set of blocks. So we do that effectively at our own OS level within our hyperconverged appliance.
Excellent. And then there's a couple questions here kind of around ransomware. Like, how do I know that the ransomware didn't encrypt my backup data as well? And how do I know when I go to restore, if I have a ransomware attack, how do I know that I'm not just restoring files that are already infected? A few questions around that.
So the first piece is our platform, the actual Rubrik platform, is immune from being encrypted. And we kind of talked about that a little bit with the append-only file format. Since we're never writing data in native source file format, whatever ransomware event has happened, if we ingest it onto the platform, it doesn't have lateral movement, right? It's been encrypted and sent to our disk. So it doesn't have the ability to burn down your recovery times. The second part is we integrate with other pieces. We are not a security tool, right? So today we have lots of different vendors on here today that can talk to you about the forensics of what happened, what was the actual ransomware signature, and all of those other tool sets can help you identify the actual hash, the things that have been edited. Our ability to recover, you can recover in isolation, so you can actually search for things like affected hashes within specific files that some of these security vendors that are actually focused on security can tell you about.
Excellent. Steven's asking, what does a restore look like? Like, what's the general process for restoring? You want to talk about recovery a little bit?
Sure. A recovery effort for us is, within our platform, it's a global, search query. So you type in the information that you're trying to recover, whether that's an email in M365, a subject, or whether it's a VM or a database on an on-premise environment. We identify, hey, this is everything we've done because we index every file and every bit of information that we ingest. You then get a card. The card tells you everything that you need to know about this. You can choose the point in time that you want to recover to. The recovery workflow then becomes optional for you, depending on what it is. We can do a live mount, where we're taking a database and presenting it as an SMB share. We can do an instant recovery of an entire VM. You can recover one single file of a VM back to production, an LM host file. So the recovery workflow becomes very simple, but each one is a little bit different depending on whether it's a database or it's an individual file, whether it's a physical server or a NAS share.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see where that would be different depending on what you're recovering. This is a good question. What about RPO and RTO? Do we have any idea ahead of time of what that would be?
Yep, the RPO is 100% a function of what your business wants the RPO to be for that data set, right? You value the data. I don't want to have more than a 4-hour gap of time. So you define your RPO. Where Rubrik assists is driving the RTO down to near zero, right? So for a database, I can have a database spun up from a point in time that you've chosen and presented for you to write queries against inside of 2 minutes. So your RTO is approaching, sub 1 minute time. A VM, I can live mount in sub 1 minute because it's just promoting that backup from my storage into your compute environment, right? So these are all things that can be near instantaneous. For the ransomware piece, that's what that kind of orchestrated call is. Driving the RTO down means minimizing how much data I need to recover and then automating the recovery. You're not kicking off 50 different restore jobs. You're choosing the data that was impacted and hitting go, and then we do the orchestration from an automated fashion behind you. So RPO is completely in your control. RTO is what we control at Rubrik, and we drive that close to zero with the automation processes around the recovery workflows.
Nice. All right. Well, Matt, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here in our live Q&A. There's a number of more technical questions for you there in the electronic queue, but really great presentation and cool demo. Thanks for being on.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right. I've just brought up our first poll question here related to Rubrik. They're asking, what additional information would you like about the Rubrik solution? And I can see there's a lot of interest in this already, tons of questions coming in. We didn't have time for all of them there in the live Q&A, so we'll be routing these over to Matt and the Rubrik crew. So thank you for all the excellent questions. We do want your feedback there still on the poll, and I'll leave that there while I announce our first of our Amazon $500 gift card prizes. This gift card is going out. This gift card is going out to Ed Andreo from Kansas. Congratulations, Ed Andreo from Kansas. Still 2 more gift cards to give out on today's EcoCast, so make sure you stay tuned. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll question. It's now time to move on to our next presentation on the EcoCast. I'm excited now to welcome Martin Crew, Senior Director for Industry Solutions at Gigamon. Hey, Martin, it's great to have you on.
Okay, so should I take it away?
Yes, sir. Yeah, take it away, Martin.
Okay, great. So hello, everybody. My name is Martin Crew. I'm responsible for industry marketing here at Gigamon. And what we're going to talk about today is how our product can help you ensure visibility across the modern networking infrastructure. Okay, so we are going to talk very briefly about who is Gigamon, give you a little bit of context on who we are, what we do, and why we're so qualified to discuss this topic. And then we're going to talk about how we ensure visibility across this modern networking landscape, which is constantly evolving. So we'll talk about that at general terms and architectural level, and then we'll get into discussing the specifics of a couple of use cases that we're seeing very, very commonly these days, and give you an example of how we ensure hybrid visibility, not just in this environment at a general level, but how we do it at scale. And we're going to talk about a user that has 600,000 users on the network. So it's obviously a very large scale implementation. Okay, a little bit about Gigamon then. So just 2 slides here. So the first, we've been around about 15 years, and we are one of the leaders in the visibility market. And what we're focused on is delivering visibility and analytics on all the traffic in motion across the network. So we're not focused on the static data on the network. We're focused on the data that's traversing the network in real time. And the key thing that we do is we provide visibility into all of that traffic. So it doesn't matter what the source is, it doesn't matter what the target is. If it's on the network, we see it, and we see it down to packet level. Purpose of doing that is it enables your organization to run fast, to stay secure, and to innovate. And we believe the innovation is obviously critical because as these networking landscapes constantly change, you've got to have the ability to keep up with that change and be deploying applications that are constantly evolving to meet the performance needs, the interface needs, and the business needs of both your external audiences and your customers. A little bit ahead of the myself. Okay, so just wanted to talk about the organization. So we, as I said, about 15 years old. We've got 4,200 customers worldwide, which obviously is a respectable number, but not a huge number. And the why of that is that these are some of the largest organizations. So these are some very complex distributed organizations. For example, 83 of the Fortune 100 use us. All major of the top 10 US federal agencies use us. And we have very similar levels of penetration in finance, healthcare, service providers, and in fact, across the board. So the primary characteristic of a Gigamon customer is that they've got a large, complex, highly distributed infrastructure. And what they are trying to achieve by using Gigamon is to get visibility into all of the traffic that's moving across that infrastructure. So let's move forward and sort of get into the meat of the presentation. So the world that we find ourselves in is that all of our customers are in a highly evolving situation. You know, we sort of think about where the world came from. We think about sort of the on-premises infrastructure that gradually over the years built out in complexity. So more and more applications being deployed on more servers, more tools being deployed in order to manage that. And then as we sort of go through the evolution of the system, you know, we get a lot of new factors coming into place. So we get the move from purely on-premises or on-premises and virtualized into organizations using the public cloud. And when we look at our customers, we see the vast majority of our customers now operating not only in a hybrid environment, but in a multi-cloud environment. So supporting more and more infrastructures as they evolve. Second thing we're seeing is 5G. So obviously, we're all kind of waiting for the big surge of 5G. We all see it on our handsets, but in terms of the service provider market, we're still really waiting to see a lot of this actually hit the market. But it's clearly the case that 5G is going to put even more pressure on the networks. We're going to have to evolve to cope with that, cope with all the new devices, cope with all the traffics, and also the increasing variety of the traffic. Similarly, talking about increasing variety and volume of traffic, we can think about IoT and the OT and the impact that that's had. So it's no longer a case that OT and these type of devices are just being used by organizations working, for example, in a manufacturing environment or working in a utility environment. Every organization is now being impacted by this. For example, most of the buildings that we operate in when we actually do go into the office are smart buildings. They've got smart thermostats. They've got security systems. All of these massively increase the amount of data on the network and also open up new potential vulnerabilities across that network. We also see in response to that the evolution of things like zero trust security, where we're now seeing trends that, you know, everyone is saying, we have to move away from perimeter-based to a situation where no user, no asset, no application, no flow, even the network itself, none of these things can be trusted, which means the granularity that you need to move to manage at in order to achieve this increases exponentially. And then finally, the old data center isn't going away. We're seeing rapid evolution of what's happening within the data center. And again, a lot more volume coming into play there, a lot more bandwidth being deployed. So the overall picture is clearly one of constant evolution. And as we know, with that evolution comes complexity. So as we look at the hybrid network, you know, we see this constant movement of data, more and more tools being added to the network in order to manage that data. So whether it's for performance reasons, whether it's for security reasons, organizations are constantly adding tools. And we see, when we look at our customers and we work with our prospects, we see a very common picture, which is where they are adding more and more tools to cope with peaks rather than having the appropriate number of tools on the network to cope with the day-to-day volume of data. Often they're adding these additional tools almost out of fear. You know, what happens if there's a sudden spike in traffic on the network and we don't have the tools to cope with it? So this is one of the things that we see our customers looking to us to help solve. And the way that we solve this problem is, I think, a sort of fairly classic IT playbook. So what we see is that the best way to cope with this complexity is to add a layer in between all of the sources that are creating the traffic and all the sources that are consuming the traffic, the tools in this case. So we add an abstraction layer which really has a number of core functions. So the first is it's got to be able to acquire all the traffic. So regardless of the source of the traffic, we've got to be able to acquire it. And this doesn't just mean traffic moving north-south on and off the network. It means traffic moving within the network. This is something that we see more and more, and we'll talk a bit more about this in detail later. But it's not just traffic moving across a single network, it's traffic moving across multiple networks and within those networks. So for example, as you deploy container-based applications, making sure that you've got visibility in traffic as it moves between those different containers. Second thing that we see as a need is, having acquired that traffic, we need to be able to send it to many tools. So the typical model of having a tool per agent, or in the cloud world, a traffic mirroring process or a tunneling process per agent, that's just grossly inefficient. So really what you want, if you're going to implement this type of abstraction layer between the two, is the ability to acquire traffic once and then distribute it to all the tools that can consume it. You've also, as you have that traffic, got to be able to look into it. You've got to be able to detect. You've got to be able to discover the nature of the traffic. So this enables you to see things like shadow IT. It enables you to see crypto mining, crypto jacking that might be occurring on the network, and to see into unmanaged devices that are out there. So all organizations these days are getting a proliferation of devices where they can't drop a classic agent onto it. So whether it's things like thermostats in buildings, whether it's other shop floor devices that are maybe too old to accommodate an agent, you've got these unmanaged devices, and you have to be able to understand the traffic that they're generating to actually understand what the device is in many cases, what it should be doing, and making sure that the way it's behaving is compliant with its function. If you've got these things in place, then you've got the ability to make sure that you can comply with all the data regulations that apply to your organization. So this is one of the key areas that we see, particularly as we move into the cloud, that customers are very concerned about how their networking landscape evolves to keep them in compliance with everything that the regulators, that the federal agencies, that their internal audit people require. So this level of visibility is critical to that compliance capability. It's also critical to the troubleshooting on the network. With all this complexity, we know that the reality is that things are going to go wrong, and that when they go wrong, you need the ability to precisely and quickly identify where the issue is and then dive down into the data, down to the packet level in many cases, to actually resolve what's going on. So these are the characteristics that we believe a fabric needs to bring to bear for it to be of value to sort of the modern organization. The approach that we take is we add what we call deep observability to the networking world. So taking the characteristics I just described, we have the ability to apply those to any workload and to visualize all of the traffic that those workloads are generating, to understand what tools they need to go to, and then to send the information through to those tools in the most appropriate format. So that means optimizing the traffic for those tools. So the tools are only seeing relevant traffic. They're not seeing deduplicated traffic. If they can handle metadata, that we're actually taking the data to the metadata level and only sending them what they need to see. So that's a critical part of what we believe a modern fabric needs to do in response to these evolving challenges. So this product we call Gigamon Hawk. It's an evolution of what we've been doing for the last 15 years. And it really does take a huge amount of learning, not just from our own R&D teams, but from 4,200 of the most demanding organizations worldwide, and provide them the capability to manage from any workload to any tool and across a wide variety of platforms. So our software is interoperable. It can work in data centers on our appliances. It can work in virtualized environments like VMware and Nutanix, and it works across all the major flavors of the public cloud. And you see some of those bulleted out on this slide. So what we do with the traffic when we actually have it on the network and when we've got this deep observability into it is we go beyond just the basic access. We go into really the brokering of it. So the understanding of what is it, where does it need to go, what are the characteristics of those tools, how do they need to consume the information in the most effective manner. And that really is sort of the transformational layer of things here. So making sure we're not sending duplicates, making sure that we're only sending relevant traffic. So for example, using techniques like slicing and sampling to determine what the traffic is and then understand how much of that traffic and the payload associated with it needs to actually go to a tool, transforming it, as I mentioned, to the metadata level, if we can do that. We consistently see in our studies that where we can use metadata, we're reducing the volume of traffic to tools by 90 to 95%. So whether it's using NetFlow, whether it's using IPFix, whether it's using our own application metadata intelligence capabilities, anything that can be done to take this traffic from the raw level to the metadata level is going to greatly enhance the efficiency of tools like SIMS. And then finally, the analytic capability is very, very important. Understanding what's happening on the network allows you to predict what's likely to happen on the network, lets you see potential threats as they develop, so that you're actually looking at real-time information rather than trying to work from logs or other things that are giving you a historic look back onto the network. So that real-time analytic capability is one of the critical things that we believe that the modern organization needs and that we bring to the table. What it actually looks like in a product sense, in this sort of little stack diagram, we've got both physical taps and appliances that let us tap, obviously, into the physical world. We've got their equivalents in the cloud, so virtual taps for all of the environments shown below. Above those, we bring the information into our operating system environment, and that powers our smart applications. So these applications we call the GigaSmart family. These address things like really understanding the traffic on the network and how to optimize that, understanding what's happening at the application level. So we don't just have visibility to the lower levels of network traffic. We see everything on the network from level 1 to level 7 and can manage at all those levels. We bring security intelligence to the table. We have a product called Threat Insight, which is a guided SaaS network detection and response product. So this doesn't just work with AI to detect threats. This is backed up by a human team of expert operators, expert SecOps people who can work with you to understand what's happening and to remediate threats and then harden the network against them to prevent similar things happening again. And then finally, we have what we call subscriber intelligence. So for people working in a service provider environment where they really need to understand what's happening at the level of their individual subscribers, how their plans can be optimized, secured, etc. We've got a module specifically for that. And then above everything, we have our Fabric Manager. And Fabric Manager is, if you will, the single pane of glass that gives you visibility into everything that's happening on the network. And I want to talk about two specific use cases that we're seeing increasingly common in this evolution of networks. So the first is the issue of encrypted traffic. So as we look at networks, we know that increasingly the traffic on the network and within the network, including east-west traffic, is being encrypted. Obviously, this is driven by the security concerns that all of us have these days. But very, very important that organizations have the ability to understand what traffic is encrypted, have an efficient mechanism to decrypt it, efficient mechanism to then get it to the tools that they need without opening up for man-in-the-middle of attacks. So this is a capability that we bring to the table. The unique thing that we do here is that we do it on a centralized basis. So rather than decrypting at the firewall level, we believe the most effective way to do this is to actually have a central decryption capability. So bring everything to a purpose-built appliance that does nothing other than decrypt traffic, understand the nature of that traffic, understands where it needs to go to, and then route it to that destination. So it's very much a decrypt once, feed many approach. And over again, when we compare this to perimeter-based decryption, we see it's significantly more effective. Not just more effective from the point of view of the speed of it, but also it takes workload away from a lot of perimeter devices that can do this, but weren't really designed to do it. And when they do undertake this function, it often compromises a lot of their core functionality. Decrypting the edge often degrades performance at the edge by 70–80%. So it's much more efficient in our view to have a purpose-built device on the network that provides this central capability. Another big thing that we're seeing is as we move into the cloud and the world of ultra-scale apps, organizations are re-architecting existing applications and developing new applications around the use of containers or other service-based architectures. Ensuring that you've got visibility into the container level is absolutely critical to the successful monitoring and troubleshooting of problems in this high-scale environment. So this is one of the things that we've recently introduced, the ability to get the same level of granular visibility into containers that we've always had on premises. So whether it's Kubernetes or other of the containerized environments, this is something that we've introduced recently and has been very successful with our cloud customers. Why is it successful? Well, it addresses a lot of the critical things. So it eliminates blind spots. It improves security by providing this level of visibility into everything that's happening on the network, and it lets us streamline operations. So we work very closely with the automation and orchestration features on the network to integrate with them so that as these orchestration tools enable the power or the scale out of organizations of applications on an automatic basis, that the security is embedded in that process. So every time a new container is spun up or a new instance, we make sure that the visibility goes with that. So it's not a matter of operators having to think about, hey, how do I make sure the new instance is secure, or do I really know these containers are secure? Because this is embedded in the automation capability, we know that whatever new assets are spun up, visibility is embedded in them. Okay, so let's just pull this together. And before I summarize, let's just talk about one of our customers who we're working with. Sorry, build that slide out. Okay, so we're talking here about hybrid visibility for the evolving network. And one of the good examples we've got is work that we did to secure the 2020 census. So here was a very, very complex network, a network that was spec'd to support up to 600,000 concurrent users. It was running on thousands of different hosts in a multi-cloud environment. And their requirement was obviously to encrypt all the traffic on the network because given its the sensitivity of this data, it had to be encrypted. So we had to provide the decryption capability centrally to understand what the traffic was, where it needed to go to. We had to power that. And then we also had to make sure that we were working with the tools that they were using for intrusion detection and making sure that the network was absolutely secure, that there was no one breaking into that network, trying to hijack the data from that network. So that was absolutely critical. And the third aspect that was critical was making sure that there was no data loss, making sure that every survey response was collected, was auditable, all those things, and that nothing was being exfiltrated or otherwise compromised on the network. So we worked with a couple of different integrators. There was an overall general contractor who was sort of masterminding everything for US Census. And underneath them, they had a technical integrator called T-Rex. And it was them who was really responsible for the network design and for the ability to bring in Gigamon to actually help them be the tool that would sit on the network, have visibility into all the traffic, make sure it was decrypted, make sure it went to the right tools, and that everything was functioning at a very, very high level. So this was a really good example that we undertook, obviously 2020, so we were doing a lot of the work in 2019. So it was a relatively early, very large-scale multi-cloud deployment, but it was something that went very successfully, and an association that we're extremely proud of. So just to summarize, so the product that enables all of this to happen is Gigamon Hawk, and this is what provides the deep visibility into all the traffic on the network. And deep visibility really means we can see everything, we can secure things on blind spots, and that includes at scale. So as stuff scales out, you don't lose visibility into containerized-based traffic or into new instances. We can simplify everything, so full integration with the automation and orchestration tools to reduce the number of manual processes as far as possible. And then finally, save, because we're optimizing the traffic. We're not just acquiring traffic and routing it on. We're optimizing that traffic. We're using, as I mentioned, techniques like deduplication, like application filtering, slicing, sampling, generation of metadata to reduce the overall amount of traffic on the network and therefore reduce bandwidth, reduce computational costs, and also reduce data movement costs. So all things that I think in the context of a modern network are top of mind priorities for many of the CIOs and the CISOs that we integrate with. So that's what we are focused on. Thank you for paying attention. Sorry about the glitches early on in the presentation, but let's see what we've got by way of questions.
Absolutely, yeah. We do have some questions coming in for you, Martin. While we take those questions, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there. The poll is on the screen, and it says, what additional information would you like about the Gigamon solution? So we appreciate everyone's feedback there on the poll. Let's see, first question that I see here, Ian is asking, this is a good one. He's asking, with the Gigamon abstraction layer, are you using port mirroring, say on the core switch, or is this an agent-based architecture? How does this work kind of behind the covers?
Yeah, so very much consistent with what I've been talking about today. There are many, many ways to access traffic from physical networks and from cloud networks. And it's very important from our point of view that we support all of those. So yes, we can support an individual agent, a Gigamon agent. And as I mentioned, that can feed multiple tools, often eliminating the need for multiple other agents. But we can also use mirroring. We can also use tunneling techniques to get the data in a cloud environment. And we can use any combination of those. So it really isn't a matter of pick one. It's a matter of for particular workloads, for particular tools that need to be fed, what is the most effective way to access that traffic? And then we can deploy the right technique. So the answer to what's a very good and very basic question is, yeah, we can support all of those techniques and use the right one for the particular workload that we need to feed.
Great. Yeah, I like that flexibility. Kind of covers all the bases there. And then his follow-up question, and I think you just answered it, is how do you handle, I'm thinking consolidating the traffic from multiple data centers and clouds and everything like that? Is it through the tunneling techniques that you were talking about?
Yeah, that's one of the techniques that we can use. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then let's see, another question here. They're asking, this must be an existing Gigamon customer. They're asking, is Hawk interoperable with our existing Gigamon appliances?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important point for existing customers to understand, or for organizations that are in a hybrid environment. We've designed our software to be fully interoperable across our appliances, across virtualized environments, and across cloud environments. It's very, very difficult when you are in this hybrid world to know today exactly where the best place to locate a lot of these capabilities is. There's often no one good answer to that. You may need to deploy the same capability in physical data centers, in the cloud, in virtualized environments. And you certainly don't know in the future how you're going to evolve. So we've done two things that I think are really important. The first is the interoperability, so it doesn't matter where the software is located, the same features are available. And secondly, when you move into a cloud environment, one of the things that we see is customers not just moving to a single cloud, they're moving to multiple clouds. And as they learn the characteristics of those clouds and what's best to execute particular workloads, they may actually move workloads from one environment to another. So what we do is when we license our cloud software, we actually license it across all clouds. So you can start out with, let's say, 100% of your workloads on Azure. You can then, and over time, migrate that. So it's 30% on Azure, 30% on AWS, 30% on GCP. And the traffic and the licenses that you've got can just move. So it's not a matter of, oh, we're now using GCP, I need to go back to Gigamon, I need to get new licenses, that's going to cost me more money. No, I mean, once you've bought a license for, let's say 100 instances, whatever, those instances can be deployed anywhere within the cloud environment.
That's great. Yeah, because so many companies, like you said, their workloads and their data is moving from data center to data center and cloud to cloud. And so it's great that the Gigamon can help there and make that easy. Another question they're asking, you talked a lot about public cloud. Just to clarify, what about private clouds as well?
Yeah, this is a blind spot that I have. I often get so focused on the public cloud that I forget that the vast majority of customers out there have a huge investment in private cloud. And it's very important that the same capabilities that we have on premises and in the public cloud are available on a private basis. So yes, we've long-standing relationships with VMware, with Nutanix, for example, and we have full support for those environments. And again, full support within the overall interoperability of everything that we do.
Excellent. Well, I'm afraid we're running out of time here for our live Q&A session. I guess maybe the final question we have time for is just, what really makes Gigamon unique out there in the industry?
Okay, good question. So I think it's two things. I think it's the breadth of what we do in terms of ability to see all the traffic, and it's also the depth. So it's not just a matter of we see the network packets. We see everything from the packet level all the way up to the application level. So we really have this very, very comprehensive view of all the data in motion across a network. And I think that is something that's very powerful to organizations as they seek to ensure security in this complex environment and make sure they've got the tools they need to drive the performance for their applications and to meet customer expectations.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like that's something that so many companies out there need, is that complete visibility. Martin, it's been great having you on the EcoCast today. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Thank you very much, and I hope the audience found my comments useful.
Absolutely. And for everyone out there, for more information on Gigamon, check out the Handouts tab. There's a really nicely done resource on closing the cloud visibility gap. That's a PDF. You can just download it and check it out after the event. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll question. We do appreciate your feedback. It is now time to bring in our next presenter on today's EcoCast event. I'm excited now to introduce Jay Wolfgang Garlick, Advisory CISO at Duo. Wolfgang, take it away.
Hey, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, today we're looking at DevOps, and as a security professional, as a former leader of a DevOps team and a security team, I have opinions. We'll just put it that way. I think all too often we end up something like this, right? Imagine a developer. Imagine she's getting ready for a stand up, and she says something like, "You know what? I'm going to take a walk before the sprint planning." And, a teammate pipes up and goes, "Hey, be careful, it's supposed to rain." What does security do? We're like, "Hey, wait, no, I got this. I got this. I will help you out. There's a use case here. We don't want to let you get wet." And also, sometimes people throw stuff up a building. So I've got the perfect control for you. Here you go. And this is what I fear we come across when we're designing and designing security controls. This particular one comes from the uncomfortable, and I'm going to use them in many of my slides because they're amazing. You should check them out. But my main goal here is to find the power of design thinking where we're not giving concrete umbrellas, where we're giving something that makes sense, that's applicable, and that doesn't slow down the DevOps team. This is not an easy task, not an easy task at all. And I think it's a task really for design. I think it's a task where we have to get out of the way of thinking of here's stop and go, here's controls, here's command and control, here's the checklist I need to implement, and think about it in a different way. What really keyed me on to this was the classic book by Don Norman. I just saw a Gartner talk where they said, 95% of breaches are caused by people making mistakes. And I was so frustrated after doing a pen test and finding all the errors in our environment. And I came across this line from Don Norman where he says, most industrial accidents are caused by human error, right? Estimates range from 75 to 95%. So how is it people can be so incompetent? I'm like, yes. How can they be so incompetent? Tell me, Don Norman, so I know what to do. And they're like, yeah, they're not. It's a design problem. And I started thinking, don't tell me that I'm the problem. You can't tell the security guy that we're the problem. We're the ones that are like they're. It took a while for that to sink in, but I do think it's paramount that it does get us to a point where we're looking at how to put in place controls without always thinking the other teams are incompetent. There's fundamentally two directions of my line of thinking on this. One direction is, obviously getting in the way of the adversary, stopping the criminals. I saw that cybercrime topped out at 1 trillion last year. Incredible number of money being moved from the private sector into these criminal gangs that are then weaponizing it against us. But of course, at the same time, we also have to focus in on usability, right? This should be our developers. I wish. So we need to keep an eye on what is making our developers happy and what is frustrating our adversaries. And I don't think these two things are in conflict. I think back to the iPhone, when the iPhone went passwordless, right? Originally, almost no one used a passcode. Steve Jobs had a rant on this. Steve Jobs has a rant on everything, but Steve Jobs had a rant on this. Why would you put in place a passcode, blah, blah, blah. But they knew they needed a passwordless experience. So they did design research. They looked at how people were using it. You pick up your phone, you hit the home button, you go. You pick up the phone, you hit the home button, you go. What if we were to put the fingerprint right there? And what if we were to use a smart default that nudged people towards enabling that when they set up their phone? Same workflow, right? Same experience. The result was within a year, lock screens jumped from 30% to 80%, just in making it a part of the way that people worked. It's those types of things that need to be thought of, right? Intentionally or accidentally, we're creating user experiences. On the one hand, we may be enabling a piece of functionality like let's do telephony. Let's allow people to sign up for our services and do callbacks. On the other hand, that experience aim for the user is creating a path for the adversary. And we've seen that too. Part of that 1 trillion over the past year was in phone scams of organizations who are misusing telephony options when signing up for accounts. So we know that when we're building things, we are creating these paths. And there's a couple different things to think about. One is the paths that they take, and the other is the choices they make. And this falls under behavior economics. This falls under culture change. Looking at those number of steps, looking at the familiarity steps, looking at any friction. We often talk about friction, right? How can we reduce friction as we are building systems? But also the choices and the predictability and the cognitive load. Now, on the one hand, this is, again, for the users, for our developers, how do we make security part of the normal workflow, part of the normal process? How do we reduce the security on the friction side of things so that, for example, if you're pushing out code to production, it's running a lot of your tests automatically. But it's also for the adversary. I had a pen test going on, and they had messed with the choices component of this. When the person would scan, they would get a 404 or 500 as usual, when you're doing a crawling a site for a pen test. But this customer very ingeniously had set it up that when that happened, they were automatically kicked out. They were locked out for a period of time. So my poor pen tester, who knows his path and knows his set of choices to be successful, keeps having to make different choices, keeps getting interrupted. And as a matter of fact, that ran down the clock so much that the pen tester was never able to successfully get into the application and navigate it. Really intriguing example of using these techniques. So what happens when it doesn't happen, right? What happens when we don't take this path into account? Well, for one, of course, the developers who are incentivized to push code are going to go ahead and do the work they need to do, bypassing our controls. For another thing, as we know, if we're not thinking about this path, be it a kill chain approach or a MITRE ATT&CK framework approach, if we're not thinking about that path and putting in place controls that are slowing them down, that are causing them to think heavier, well, they're going to bypass our controls altogether and get the cheese. So let's take a couple of examples of how this might play out. One example that we're seeing a lot with systems that are being built for customers and consumers and for internal workforces is the passwordless. So the password as a primary factor has been like our single line of defense since 1961. As a matter of fact, it's really interesting to me that one of the first things you'll read about when you look up the history of passwords is the first password breach, which was in the 1960s, where passwords were in clear text. And accidentally or intentionally, depending on the story you read, that text file got swapped with a message of the day file, and everyone got everyone's passwords. So for decades, we've had this process where passwords were weak, were broken, so we tried to encrypt them, we had them be longer, we had people rotate them, right? Everything that goes against what I just said. We're not putting more load on the machine, we're asking people to do different steps and make different choices. And of course, that again is the key to bad design, asking people to do things that are inconsistent with the way they work. Multi-factor came up as a way to solve this. And here at Duo, we've spent a significant amount of time working to make multi-factor very easy, very quick. There's a very strong indication that if you make multi-factor and security easy on the end user, that means fewer help desk calls. That means more or fewer escalations to the administrator, which means fewer problems for IT, which in turn turns into just a healthier authentication stack, as well as happier users, more adoption. So we've seen this growth of factors and this improvement in the factors in the industry. What that has led us to believe is that we can actually get rid of the password altogether, just drop the password and rely on a couple of these strong factors, which removes all of what we've been asking for the users for so often. And this is very useful if you want to make it very quick for people to get in to work on their code. If you want to make it very easy and secure for your admins to go ahead and work on their systems, right? The idea that there's less authentication, and the authentication that we're using is using a stronger factor. Now, when we think about it from the adversary perspective, what we're thinking about is how do we actually increase the number of steps? And one of the things that's very difficult to know is how many steps do you add to cause a adversary to quit, right? It's a great pub trivia question. If it's a Friday night, you're like, hey, I have a great idea. Let's ask people security questions. Ask them that. How many steps do you need before a criminal will give up or will fail to breach your systems? Very hard to tell. The Verizon Data Breach Report has done some really intriguing work on this. And what they've actually found is with an N of 87 that around 10 is the magic number to cut the likelihood of an attack in half. If you have 10 or more steps, the likelihood of those steps being detected or prevented or the criminal giving up increases and the success of the attack drops to 50%. So we've got some good data that shows where we can add steps that counts. The trick is adding those steps in a way that's transparent to the users. With the example of passwordless, what that means is reducing the burden on the users vis-a-vis long passwords, rotated passwords, special characters, etc., while increasing the security properties using a stronger factor, using additional trust behind it, which we'll get to in just a moment. So we're actually putting more of the burden on the machine. We're increasing the number of steps to the attacker. At the very same time, we're reducing the steps for the workforce and we're making the lives of our DevOps people easier. I mentioned trust is another component of this. What do I mean by trust? So the principle of least trust, as opposed to the principle of least privilege, is least privilege is on the authorization side. Everything you can possibly gain access to, everything you can possibly do. Least trust is on the authentication side, where you're connecting up to your resources. And when you're connecting, when you're accessing those resources on a per connection basis, do we trust this access request? And there's a number of things that we can do to determine if we trust it, right? We can look at easy to spoof indicators, but still reasonably good ones, like your IP address or your location. Again, easy to spoof though. I was at a conference one time where right before lunch, I looked down at my phone and I noticed the time zone was weird. And I noticed shortly thereafter that my phone thought I was in Shanghai because the lovely people at the conference had taken over the phone network and routed my phone onto a rogue access point. So clearly these things can be bypassed, clearly these things can be intercepted. However, as we move up the stack and we look at not only strong user authentication, but strong device authentication, have we seen this device before? Does it have a certificate or a strong cookie that we can use for trust? Is it healthy? We can start making some really good decisions about whether or not to allow that access to go through. And again, you can think about the zero trust components, which is the identity is trying to access something, running through a proxy or running through MFA or running through whatever your control stack is in front of it to make that decision to enforce policy and determine whether or not to trust it. You can think about that from a couple of different ways. We can think about that as the developers who are getting access to their source code. There's a number of ways that you can use zero trust to evaluate, is it really the developer? Is it really on a good device? Is that developer free from infection or concern? Or has their session been taken over? Or is it not the developer at all? It's someone who stole the creds. You can use a similar design pattern on your IT ops folks who are getting at your back end of your cloud infrastructure. You can also use a lot of this design pattern when building applications, and we're starting to see this in the consumer space under oftentimes the auspices of anti-fraud, making sure that the person who's on the system is truly our customer. So there's a number of different ways that these techniques can be used. What's nice about them is, again, if the user is following the normal path that they take, well, we're not in their way, right? We're not asking them to do anything extra. We're not asking them to elevate creds. If they aren't, if, for example, think about how Amazon implements this. You can order stuff from Amazon all day long, right? I can put stuff in my cart to my heart's content. I know, because I'm sure after this call, I'm going to go downstairs and my porch is going to be full of boxes. However, if someone goes in and uses my Amazon from an unrecognized computer, if someone goes in and uses my Amazon and tries to send to an unrecognized address or use a different credit card, what happens? Well, I am not on the normal path, it's going to challenge me. And in my case, it'll actually need to authenticate and do multi-factor to get back in and approve that change. So you can see we can really architect systems to get out of the way of the user and only get in the way when it matters. Now, the tooling behind this is also important. We want to make sure that we're not adding too much. I think of many outages that I've been a part of where you're trying to scramble and figure out what's going on and put things back together. And everyone's got their own tool and everyone's got their own visibility into what's going on. And that creates an outage. Some research that we've done on the Cisco side backs this up, where we find that those with the longest amount of outages, 17 hours or more, are the ones using the most tools. So when we think about this, it's also paramount that we're only adding tools where it matters, not only adding steps where it matters. So for more on Zero Trust, obviously check out the standards. It's become quite well defined, which is really gratifying for me to see as someone who's been championing it for a long time. All right, more on design thinking. When we start to think about where to add these things, when we start to think about security as the goal of making it as easy as possible on the developer and making it as hard as possible on the criminal, design thinking offers us some really good steps. You can look at the Cisco process, which is down here at the bottom. You can look at the IDO process, but both of them begin with that concept of empathy, with that concept of understanding what the people who are going to use this system do, how they work, right? And there's some great tools in the DevOps toolbox for doing this, be it workflow analysis, journey maps, behavior maps, this idea of knowing these steps that the user is going to take. On the defensive side, on the security side, there's some great tools there too, with threat modeling, with doing threat trees and threat path analysis. So we can do that to have a good understanding of where we should employ our security. However, of course, users aren't always going to do what we expect them to do. There has been some really good stuff coming out of behavioral economics that shows the various ways that this can go wrong, be it from backfiring, be it from taking more risks. I'll give you one example from my case. There's one way that this can go wrong is treatment offset by later behavior. As an example, I had a security incident that I had to investigate at one point in my career. And what had caused it was the gentleman in question who knew better, who knew about our security controls, actually had a good relationship with him, had brought in his son's laptop, which his son had got infected. And he brought the laptop in and he plugged it into the network. And so that gives you an idea of when this was, right? It wasn't even on Wi-Fi, it was plugged into the network. And of course, that infection spread. Later on, I had a conversation. I said, why did you do this? Why would you bring in this infected laptop? He said, well, you know, Wolf, I know about all the security controls. Where else am I going to bring it? This is the most secure place. And I'm like, well, thank you, but please don't ever do that again, right? There's a number of different ways as we move down this journey that our users can misinterpret or still incur risk, even when we're doing the best of things. So to troubleshoot that, there's a couple of different ways to think about it. There's a 4 Eyes framework that I like that I first heard about from Fernando Montenegro, but was actually publicized and developed by Spencer Greenberg. And it basically categorized things in ignorance. They just didn't know. So we know we need to provide them better information. Irrationality, right? It just didn't fit the way that people were working. Incentives is a good one. Especially in the DevOps world. All right, think about this. If you're insisting, right, on gating on a security review, we will not allow it to push into production without a security review. But at the same time, if you're punishing developers who are missing their targets, right? If you don't hit your deadline on Friday, what have you now done? You've got an incentive mismatch, and what you've actually done is you've incentivized very cursory high-level security reviews, right? Yeah, that looks good, push it. So we need to think about the incentives of both teams and make sure they're aligned. And we need to think about investment. Oftentimes, many security problems that are occurring are simply because we don't have good tooling, be it SAST or DAST or whatever our analysis tools are on the code side, or perhaps we have a staffing shortage. Either one of those would be an example of an investment failure that leads to these types of problems. So we can think about how the behavior will go wrong, and we can think about what categories of causes led it to go wrong, and then we can figure out how to get it back in place. I would argue that kindness is the original security control. Kindness and understanding. What got us here? What is our DevOps teams trying to achieve? And how can we make sure that we're doing so, like passwordless, like an iPhone, right? In a well-designed way where we're getting the controls right. So in part, this is learning by doing. In part, this is encouraging the teams to do what they would do naturally and building controls around it. If you don't know these two, these are Ray and Charles Eames. Oh man, have they always inspired me? You should definitely look at them. But their whole idea was effectively play, right? Play is the way that good work gets done. It was true of industrial design. It was true of good security work, I believe. And it's something that, in a way, we sometimes forget in our rush to implement good controls. We got into this, if you're in dev, because you liked singing the song of the machine, right? You liked writing the code and producing results. We got into this from a security perspective because we liked knowing how the machines worked and figuring out how to bypass things and how to get more out of them that was not immediately available. We got into this in a very real way for just about every technology professional I've ever talked to. This was fun. This was fun. So when we think about design thinking as applied to security controls, as applied to DevOps, we need to think about how we can protect that fun and encourage it and add some more momentum to it by reducing the friction and only popping up where it really matters. So some final thoughts. You always hear that phrase, right? Culture eats strategy. Well, culture also eats security. We're a good appetizer. So let's talk a little bit about doing this from a cultural perspective, where to put metrics in place and how to manage this forward. So throughout this talk, I've emphasized the need to design for usability. I believe that usability equals security. I believe that the more constraints we add, the harder people will work to creatively avoid security. One incident I was involved with occurred because we had people who you had to use a VPN client that broke other things and was dated. The VPN client, you had to put a username in and password, and then you had to put a portion of your password in and a PIN from an RSA token. Sometimes that would tell you your password is incorrect and you had to start all over. And there was really no rhyme or reason for why it would do that. So you had to do those things. And once you got on, now you had to execute a command script to mount a file share with a shared password. That doesn't make sense, right? You got a unique password, then a shared password. We can have some conversations as to whether that is appropriate from a security perspective. So we had all those steps just to get into the evidence files that were being used for this particular project. The result of all those constraints was a member of the team very creatively went, we'll just copy out all the files and we'll create a nice script that keeps them synced onto our SharePoint. Good for achieving the mission, but definitely not good in terms of are all these files protected by MFA and everything else. So the more constraints there are, the more creative users become, and the more creative users become, the more dangerous they become. And again, on the flip side of that is where we are designing for defensibility, increasing friction, increasing effort, and balancing those two. We want to design systems that maximize the steps and efforts that criminals will have to take that forces them to do manual over automated attacks, that forces them to make mistakes, that allows us to catch them. For our dev teams, wherever possible, we want to avoid introducing controls that stops devs or slows them, even though that may be the case and there may be valid reasons to do it. Ideally, we're looking for controls that are invisible or speeds up the process. And yes, absolutely, things like passwordless and zero trust, things like good packages and good defaults will speed up the process. To do this, we need good metrics and good implementation to know where we're adding friction and know where we're getting bypassed. Not something we're oftentimes architected and instrumented to detect. But it's those things that are going to allow us to know what people are doing, right? If culture is what we do and why we do it, we need those metrics to understand it. Because creating a security culture ultimately means measuring the what and then moving to change the why. And in doing both, balancing usability and defensibility with good design.
Wolf, thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, I've just brought up our poll question that asks, what additional information would you like about the Duo solution? And we want to get your feedback here on this poll. A great presentation, Wolfgang, really wise advice when it comes to better securing our network and our IT organization. So I'll leave up the poll here while I announce our final prizes on today's EcoCast. We've got 2 more Amazon $500 gift cards going out to 2 lucky winners here in the audience today. I'm just routing these questions over to Wolfgang. Excellent. All right. Our first Amazon $500 gift card winner of the 2 is going to Brian Fott from California. Congratulations, Brian Fott from California. And then our last Amazon $500 gift card for today is going to Jay Coe from Illinois. Congratulations, Jay Coe from Illinois. And our previous winner on the event, Ed Andreo from Kansas. Of course, don't forget about our best question prizes as well. Thank you for all the excellent questions. And before you go, I do want to remind you to join us on our next upcoming event. This is happening next week, Protecting Endpoints, Human and Technical Solutions. 7 presenters back-to-back on the EcoCast next week, happening next Tuesday. Really hope to see you on that event. If you haven't received an invitation to that already, visit events.actualtechmedia.com and you can register right there. And we hope to see you there. It's a great opportunity to learn more about how to better protect your network and your company's data. All right, after this event ends, you will be automatically redirected to our Refer a Friend page where you can refer an IT friend or coworker to Actual Tech Media's online events, and you both could win a $300 Amazon gift card. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the EcoCast today. I hope that you learned a lot, and I hope that you have a great day. See you next time. Bye-bye.